The stranger appeared at the edge of the pasture, just as the sun reached its highest point in the Nevada sky, and Cole Finnegan knew immediately that his carefully ordered world was about to change forever. He had been mending fence posts on the northern boundary of his ranch, sweating through his shirt, despite the October breeze that swept down from the mountains surrounding Paradise, Nevada. The town itself was barely more than a collection of weathered buildings clustered around a single dusty street, but Cole's ranch stretched for miles beyond it, a testament to 15 years of backbreaking work since he had arrived as a restless 18-year-old with nothing but determination and $50 to his name. Now, at 33, he owned one of the most prosperous cattle operations in the territory, though prosperity had come at the cost of companionship. His hands were good men, but they kept to the bunkhouse, and Cole spent his evenings alone in the main house his father had built before succumbing to influenza 3 winters past. The figure walking among his cattle was clearly a woman, though she wore a simple calico dress that had seen better days, the hem dusty and torn in places. Her dark hair hung loose past her shoulders, catching the sunlight in shades of chestnut and amber. Cole squinted against the glare, watching as she moved from one steer to the next, her hands outstretched, her lips moving in what appeared to be conversation. His cattle, normally skittish creatures that startled at the slightest unexpected movement, stood placidly as she approached each one, their large eyes fixed on her face as though they understood every word. Cole hooked his hammer through his belt loop and began walking toward her, his boots crunching on the dry grass. As he drew closer, he could hear her voice, low and melodic, carrying across the pasture. "I know you miss having someone talk to you properly," she was saying to a massive longhorn that had always been particularly ornery. The beast stood perfectly still, his head lowered as though in supplication. Animals need conversation just as much as people do. Maybe more, since you cannot talk back and tell us what troubles you. Cole stopped a few yards away, fascinated despite himself. The woman seemed entirely unaware of his presence, moving to a young heifer that had been born just that spring. She stroked the animal's flank with a gentleness that made something in Cole's chest tighten unexpectedly. "You are going to be a fine mother someday," the woman murmured. "Strong and brave, just like your mama was. Do not let anyone tell you different." "They have needed you for years," Cole said, the words emerging before he had fully formed the thought. The woman spun around, her hand flying to her throat. Her eyes were the color of summer sage, wide with surprise but not fear. She was younger than he had initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with a heart-shaped face dusted with freckles across the bridge of her nose. There was something in her expression that spoke of hardship weathered and overcome, a quiet strength that reminded him of the desert flowers that bloomed stubbornly after spring rains. "I apologize," she said quickly, taking a step back from the heifer. "I did not mean to trespass. I was walking from town and heard them lowing so mournfully. I could not help myself." "They do sound lonesome," Cole admitted, pushing his hat back from his forehead. "I talk to them sometimes, but I reckon they know the difference between obligation and genuine interest." A smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, transforming her entire face. Animals always do. They have a sense about these things that people often lack. Cole found himself returning the smile. "Cole Finnegan, this is my ranch, Meredith Grayson." She dipped her head in a small nod, her hands clasped before her. "I truly am sorry for intruding, Mr. Finnegan. I should not have wandered onto private property." "Cole," he corrected, "and you are welcome here anytime. In fact, if you have got a moment, I would offer you some water." "It is a long walk back to Paradise in this heat." Meredith hesitated, and Cole could see the internal debate playing across her features. Propriety warred with what he suspected was genuine thirst, and eventually practicality won out. "That would be very kind. Thank you." They walked together toward the ranch house, a solid structure of timber and stone that Cole's father had built with his own hands. The interior was neat but sparse, furnished with only the essentials. Cole poured water from the pump into a tin cup and handed it to Meredith, watching as she drank deeply, her throat working. "Have you been in paradise long?" he asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. "2 weeks," Meredith said, setting the empty cup down. "I am working at the boarding house, helping Mrs. Crowley with cooking and cleaning. She was kind enough to take me on when I arrived." "Where did you come from?" Something shuddered in Meredith's expression, a brief flicker of pain that she quickly masked. "Missouri. My husband died 6 months ago. Fever. I had no family left there, and staying in the house we had shared felt like living in a tomb. A traveling preacher told me about paradise, said it was a place where people could start fresh. So I sold everything, bought a train ticket west, and here I am." Cole nodded slowly, processing this information. Widows were not uncommon in the territories, where death came easily through disease, accident, or violence. But there was something about the way Meredith spoke about her late husband, a certain flatness in her tone, that made him wonder if grief was the only emotion she carried. "I am sorry for your loss," he said, "because it was what people said. Thank you." Meredith moved toward the door, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "I should be getting back. Mrs. Crowley will worry if I am gone too long." "Wait," Cole said, the word coming out more urgently than he intended. Meredith paused, her hand on the doorframe, and he scrambled for a reason to keep her there just a moment longer. "Would you consider coming back? To talk to the cattle, I mean. I was not joking when I said they have needed someone like you. They respond better to drovers who treat them gently, and my men are good but rough. If you could spare an hour or two a few times a week, I would pay you." Meredith turned to face him fully, her eyebrows raised. "You want to hire me to talk to your cattle?" "And help gentle them," Cole said, warming to the idea even as he spoke it. "My father always said that animals thrive under kind hands. I have been so focused on expanding the herd and improving the grazing land that I have neglected the animals themselves. You clearly have a gift." "I hardly know anything about cattle ranching," Meredith protested, though Cole could see interest sparking in her sage green eyes. "You know about kindness," Cole said simply. "That is rarer and more valuable." Meredith studied him for a long moment, her gaze searching his face as though trying to determine his true motivations. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. "All right. I finish my duties at the boarding house by mid-afternoon most days. I could come then if that suits you." "That would be perfect," Cole said, trying to keep the pleasure out of his voice and failing entirely. Over the following weeks, Meredith became a fixture at the Finnegan ranch. She arrived each afternoon as promised, walking the 3 miles from town with a determination that spoke to her character. Cole would watch from wherever he was working, tracking her progress across his land until she reached the main pasture where the cattle grazed. Then he would find excuses to work nearby, mending fences that did not need mending, checking water troughs that were full, anything that allowed him to observe her without being obvious about it. She talked to the cattle as though they were old friends, telling them stories about her childhood in Missouri, about the older brother who had died of scarlet fever when she was 8, about her mother who had made the best apple pie in 3 counties. Sometimes she sang, her voice clear and sweet, carrying across the pasture like a benediction. The cattle responded to her in ways that astonished Cole's ranch hands, gathering around her in a loose circle, their massive heads lowered as though drinking in her presence. "Never seen anything like it," his foreman, a grizzled man named Tom, said one evening as they watched Meredith from the barn. "That little heifer that would not let anyone near her. She is eating out of Miss Grayson's hand now like a pet dog." Cole grunted in agreement, unwilling to admit just how much time he spent watching Meredith, how he had begun to structure his days around her afternoon visits. He told himself it was simply good business sense to monitor how his money was being spent, but in his heart, he knew the truth. He was falling for her, had been falling since that first day when she had appeared like an answer to a prayer he had not known he was praying. One afternoon in early November, Cole finally gathered the courage to approach her directly while she worked. She was sitting on the ground beside a young bull, running her hands along its flank while murmuring encouragement. She looked up as Cole's shadow fell across her, shielding her eyes against the sun. "He had a thorn in his foot," she explained, gesturing to the bull's front left hoof. "I removed it and cleaned the wound as best I could. You might want to have Tom check it, make sure infection does not set in." Cole crouched down beside her, examining the hoof in question. The bull stood perfectly still, allowing the inspection without protest. "You did good work." "How did you learn this?" "My husband raised horses," Meredith said, her voice carefully neutral. "I helped him when he would allow it." There was something in those last words that caught Cole's attention. "When he would allow it." Meredith stood, brushing dust from her skirts. The bull ambled away, rejoining the herd. "Daniel believed women should keep to the house. He tolerated my interest in the horses only because he occasionally needed an extra pair of hands and could not afford to hire help." "He sounds like a fool," Cole said bluntly. Meredith's eyes snapped to his face, wide with shock. Then, slowly, a real smile spread across her features, one that reached her eyes and made them sparkle. "Yes," she said softly, "he was." It was the first time she had spoken about her late husband with anything other than careful politeness, and Cole felt as though he had been granted access to something precious and fragile. He stood as well, dusting off his knees. "I would value your opinion on something," he said. "I have been thinking about expanding into horse breeding. The army is always looking for good mounts, and I have got the land for it. Would you walk with me to the southern pasture? I want to show you where I am considering building the stables." Meredith nodded, falling into step beside him as they left the cattle behind. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the whisper of wind through dry grass and the distant cry of a hawk. Cole was intensely aware of her presence beside him, the way her skirts brushed against his legs, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "Why did you come west?" Meredith asked suddenly. "You said you have been here 15 years. What brought you to Nevada?" Cole considered his answer carefully. "My father brought me. He was a dreamer, always convinced that fortune was waiting just over the next horizon. We tried our hand at mining first, up in Virginia City, but that did not work out. Then we heard about good grazing land down here, near Paradise. It was not much more than a way station back then, barely a town at all, but my father saw the potential. And you stayed after he died." "This is my home now," Cole said simply. "Everything I have built is here. Besides, I am not sure I would know how to live anywhere else." "The desert gets into your blood after a while." Meredith nodded thoughtfully. "I am beginning to understand that. There is something about this place, something wild and honest. Missouri felt crowded in comparison, everyone pressed up against each other, all watching and judging." They reached the southern pasture, a large flat expanse with good grass and a spring-fed creek running through it. Cole pointed out where he envisioned the stables, the training paddocks, the tack room. Meredith listened intently, asking intelligent questions about drainage and prevailing winds, about which breeds he was considering and what bloodlines he hoped to establish. "You should do it," she said finally. "This land is perfect for horses. And if you breed for endurance rather than speed, you will have army buyers lining up. They need animals that can handle long patrols in difficult terrain. Would you help me?" The question emerged before Cole could stop it, raw and hopeful. "With the horses, I mean. If I do this, I will need someone who understands them, someone they will trust." Meredith turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "Cole, I cannot stay here indefinitely. Working at the boarding house is temporary. Eventually, I will need to find something more permanent, maybe move to a larger town where there are more opportunities. What if there was something permanent here?" Cole's heart was pounding, but he forced himself to continue. "What if you stayed because you wanted to, not because you had no other choice? What are you asking me?" Meredith's voice was barely above a whisper. Cole took a deep breath, knowing he was about to either make the best or worst decision of his life. "I am asking if you might consider staying in paradise, not as an employee but as a partner. As my partner." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Meredith's face cycled through a dozen emotions: surprise, confusion, fear, and something else, something that might have been hope. "Cole, we barely know each other," she said finally. "I know you are kind to animals that cannot repay you. I know you walked away from everything familiar because staying in a place that hurt you was worse than facing the unknown. I know that when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out after a storm." Cole took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know that I have spent the last month finding excuses to be near you, and that I think about you every moment you are not here. If that is not a foundation to build on, I do not know what is." Meredith's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I was not happy in my marriage, Cole. Daniel was not a bad man, but he was not a good one either. He was cold and critical, and I spent 5 years walking on eggshells, trying to be what he wanted and never quite succeeding. When he died, I grieved for what I had hoped we might become, not for what we were. The idea of entering into another arrangement like that terrifies me." "Then do not," Cole said, taking her hands in his. They were small but strong, calloused from work. "This would not be like that. I am not looking for someone to cook and clean and stay silent. I want a true partner, someone to build something with, someone who will challenge me and stand beside me, not behind me. If you need time to think about it, I understand. But please, do not say no out of fear alone." Meredith looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "Can I ask you something? Anything? Do you love me, or do you just love the idea of having someone?" It was a fair question, and Cole gave it the consideration it deserved. "I have been alone for a long time," he admitted. "And yes, I am tired of it. But there have been other women in paradise over the years, nice women who made it clear they would be interested if I was. I never pursued any of them because I never felt what I feel with you. This thing between us, it is not just about ending loneliness. It is about finding someone whose presence makes me better than I am alone." A tear spilled down Meredith's cheek, and she brushed it away impatiently. "I need time. Not to decide if I have feelings for you, I already know I do, but to trust that this is real, that you are real." "Take all the time you need," Cole said, squeezing her hands gently before releasing them. "I am not going anywhere." They walked back to the main house in silence, but it was a different sort of silence than before, charged with new understanding. When they reached the porch, Meredith turned to him. "Thank you for being patient with me," she said. "Thank you for considering it," Cole replied. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Meredith still came each afternoon to work with the cattle, But now Cole joined her openly, no longer pretending to be doing other work nearby. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, debating the merits of different ranching techniques, discussing books they had read and places they hoped to see someday. Cole learned that Meredith had once dreamed of being a teacher, but had married Daniel instead because her mother had been ill, and they needed his financial support. He told her about the baby sister who had died before her first birthday, how his mother had never recovered from the grief and had simply faded away over the course of a year, until she died from what the doctor called a broken heart. But what Cole knew was simply the inability to keep living in a world that had taken her child. Meredith spoke more about her marriage, about the small cruelties and large disappointments, about how she had shrunk herself down to try to fit into the narrow space Daniel had allotted her. Cole listened without judgment, his anger at a dead man he had never met burning quietly in his chest. "I will never ask you to be less than you are," he promised her one chilly December afternoon as they stood watching the cattle. "Whatever we build together, it will be ours equally. Your voice, your opinions, your dreams, they all matter as much as mine." Meredith looked at him with such naked vulnerability that it made his chest ache. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me," Cole said simply. Christmas came to Paradise in a flurry of snow, unusual for the desert but not unheard of. The town decorated itself as best it could, with pine garlands and red ribbons adorning the storefronts. Cole attended the Christmas Eve service at the small church, standing in the back as was his custom. He spotted Meredith sitting near the front with Mrs. Crowley, her head bowed in prayer. After the service, as people milled about exchanging well wishes, Cole worked up the courage to approach her. She saw him coming and smiled, excusing herself from her conversation with the schoolteacher. "Merry Christmas," she said. "Merry Christmas," Cole replied. "I have something for you." "Nothing fancy," he added quickly, seeing her eyes widen. "But I saw it and thought of you." He pulled a small package from his coat pocket, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. Meredith took it carefully, her fingers brushing his. "Cole, I did not get you anything," she said, distress coloring her voice. "I do not need anything," he assured her. "Just open it." She unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a small leather-bound journal with blank pages. On the cover, stamped in gold, were the words her stories. "You told me you used to write when you were younger," Cole said, suddenly uncertain. "I thought maybe you might want to start again. You have so many stories you tell the cattle. Maybe some of them deserve to be preserved." Meredith ran her fingers over the cover, her eyes suspiciously bright. "This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me," she said softly. Then, before Cole could react, she stood on her toes and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you." Cole's face heated despite the cold, and he touched the spot where her lips had been. "You are welcome." The new year of 1888 arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Meredith continued her afternoon visits to the ranch, now bundled in a warm coat that Cole had insisted on buying for her when he noticed her old one was threadbare. They had fallen into an easy rhythm, working together to care for the cattle, making plans for the horse breeding operation that would begin in spring. It was on a bright January afternoon, with the sun glinting off patches of snow, that everything changed. Cole and Meredith were checking on a cow that was close to calving when they heard the thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast. Tom came riding up, his face grim. "Boss, we have got trouble. Raiders hit the western pasture, ran off about 30 head and shot 2 of the men. Billy is dead." "Jack is hurt bad." Cole felt the blood drain from his face. Raiders from where? Could not tell, they were masked, but they knew what they were doing, had it planned out. "Get the men together," Cole ordered, his mind already racing through possibilities. "We ride out in 10 minutes. "Cole, no," Meredith said, grabbing his arm. "Let the sheriff handle this." "The nearest sheriff is in Piotch, half a day's ride away," Cole said, his jaw set. "By the time he gets here, those cattle will be long gone and the raiders will have vanished. This is my land, my responsibility." "Then I am coming with you," Meredith said. "Absolutely not." "You do not get to tell me what to do," she said, her eyes flashing. "If you are riding into danger, I am not staying behind wondering if you are coming back." Cole wanted to argue, but Tom was already riding off to gather the men, and there was no time. "Stay close to me," he said finally, "and if shooting starts, you get yourself to safety. Promise me." "I promise," Meredith said. Within minutes, they were mounted and riding hard toward the western pasture. Cole had given Meredith the gentlest horse in his stable, a steady mare named Daisy, and she handled the animal with practiced ease. The group of 7 riders pushed across the rough terrain, following the obvious trail left by the stolen cattle. They found the herd 5 miles out, being driven toward the mountains by 4 men. When they spotted Cole's group approaching, the raiders opened fire. Cole heard the crack of rifles, saw dirt kick up near his horse's hooves. He returned fire, aiming high, hoping to scare them off rather than kill. Beside him, he was peripherally aware of Meredith clinging to her horse, her face pale but determined. The gun battle was brief but intense. One of the raiders fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. Another's mount spooked and threw him. The remaining 2, seeing they were outnumbered, wheeled their horses and fled toward the mountains, abandoning the stolen cattle and their wounded companions. Cole's men quickly secured the 2 injured raiders, binding their hands while Tom rode after the scattered cattle to round them up. Cole dismounted and walked over to the men, his rifle still ready. He pulled the mask from the first one's face and recognized him with a jolt of surprise. "Ben Murphy," he said flatly. "I should have known." Ben Murphy was a failed rancher from over near Piotch who had lost his land 2 years ago to bad decisions and worse luck. He glared up at Cole with undisguised hatred. "You have got everything," he spat. "Land, money, cattle. Some of us are not so lucky." "Luck has nothing to do with it," Cole said coldly. "I work from dawn until dark, every single day. You spent your money on whiskey and cards, and when your ranch failed, you blamed everyone but yourself. Now you are a thief and a murderer." "Billy's death is on you," Meredith said quietly, appearing at Cole's elbow. "You took a man's life over cattle that were not yours. I hope you hang for it." Ben's eyes widened as he took in Meredith's presence. "You brought a woman to a gunfight. What kind of fool are you, Finnegan?" "The kind who is going to see you face justice," Cole said. He turned to Tom. "Tie them to their horses. We are taking them to Piotch to stand trial." The journey back to the ranch with the recovered cattle and captured raiders took the rest of the afternoon. Jack, the wounded ranch hand, had been taken back to town by one of the other men and was being tended by the doctor. The report was cautiously optimistic. The bullet had passed through cleanly and missed anything vital. Billy's body had been wrapped and brought back as well, and Cole spent a somber evening making arrangements for his funeral and writing a letter to his family back in Texas. Meredith stayed with him through it all, making coffee, bringing food he did not eat, sitting quietly beside him as he struggled with the grief and guilt of losing a man under his watch. "It was not your fault," she said finally, as midnight approached and they sat together on the porch despite the cold. "Billy knew the risks. Every man who works a ranch this size knows there are dangers." "He was 22 years old," Cole said, his voice rough. "He should have had a whole life ahead of him." "Yes, he should have," Meredith agreed. And that is Ben Murphy's fault, not yours. Do not let that man steal your peace along with your cattle." Cole turned to look at her, this woman who had appeared in his life like a gift he did not deserve. "How are you so strong?" "I am not strong," Meredith said. "I am just good at surviving. There is a difference." "No," Cole said, reaching out to take her hand. "You are strong. You have been through more than most people face in a lifetime, and you are still kind, still willing to trust, still here. That is real strength." Meredith's fingers tightened around his. "I am here because of you, because you showed me that not all men are like Daniel. That partnership and respect are possible, that I do not have to shrink myself down to be acceptable." "Meredith," Cole said, his heart pounding, "I love you. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am certain of it. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love the way you talk to animals like they are people. I love that you insisted on riding into danger because you could not bear to stay behind. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you every single day." Meredith's eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have loved you since that first day when you said the cattle needed me. You saw me, really saw me in a way no one else ever has." Cole stood, pulling her to her feet, and cupped her face in his hands. "Marry me. Not because you need security or because it is the practical thing. Marry me because you want to build a life together, because we are better together than apart." "Yes," Meredith said, her smile radiant despite the tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more real. She melted against him, her arms winding around his neck, and for a long, perfect moment, the world consisted of nothing but the two of them, and the love that had taken root between them against all odds. They were married 3 weeks later in Paradise's small church, with half the town in attendance. Meredith wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Cole had ordered from San Francisco, and she carried a bouquet of winter flowers that Mrs. Crowley had somehow managed to find. Cole wore his best suit, his hands shaking slightly as he slipped the gold ring onto Meredith's finger. "I promise to honor you, respect you, and love you for all the days of my life," he vowed, his voice clear and strong. "I promise to stand beside you as your partner and equal through whatever joys and sorrows come our way," Meredith responded, her sage green eyes locked on his. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Cole kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle together, Meredith's hand tucked into the crook of Cole's elbow, both of them grinning like fools. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the barn and more food than seemed possible for such a small town to produce. There was music and dancing, with Cole spinning Meredith around until they were both breathless and laughing. Tom gave a rambling speech about how he had never seen the boss so happy, and even the normally taciturn ranch hands joined in the celebration. As the evening wore on and guests began to depart, Cole and Meredith finally found themselves alone. They stood on the porch of what was now their home, watching the stars emerge in the vast Nevada sky. "Are you happy?" Cole asked, pulling Meredith close against his side. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "This feels like a dream I am afraid to wake from." "It is real," Cole assured her. "You and me, this ranch, this life we are building, all of it is real." The first year of their marriage was everything Cole had hoped for and more. Meredith threw herself into the running of the ranch with enthusiasm and intelligence, taking over the bookkeeping when she discovered she had a natural head for numbers. She also began the work of gentling the entire herd, spending hours each day talking to the cattle, handling the calves, teaching the ranch hands her techniques. The transformation was remarkable. Cattle that had once been wild and skittish became manageable, easier to handle during branding and roundups. Other ranchers started to take notice, asking Cole what his secret was. He always gave credit to Meredith, proudly telling anyone who would listen about his wife's gift with animals. True to his word, Cole began the horse breeding operation that spring. He purchased 3 mares and a stallion with excellent bloodlines, and Meredith worked with them daily, earning their trust and respect. By summer, all 3 mares were pregnant, and plans for the new stables were underway. But it was the small moments that Cole treasured most. Waking up beside Meredith each morning, her hair spread across the pillow. Working side by side during the day, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. Evenings spent on the porch, Meredith reading aloud from her journal where she had begun recording the stories of the ranch, the cattle, the people who worked the land. On a warm evening in late June, Meredith set down her journal and turned to Cole with an expression he could not quite read. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice carrying a note of nervousness. Cole's heart jumped. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong." Meredith took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "I am pregnant. The doctor confirmed it this afternoon when I went into town." Joy exploded in Cole's chest, so intense it left him momentarily speechless. "A baby," he finally managed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Meredith asked, and Cole heard the faint echo of old fears in her voice, memories of a first marriage where her thoughts and feelings had not mattered. "Happy?" Cole pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Meredith, I am thrilled, overwhelmed, terrified, all of it. A baby, our baby." Meredith laughed, the sound bright and clear. "I am terrified too, but also excited. This child will grow up surrounded by love and open spaces. They will know they are wanted and valued. Everything I did not have, everything you lost when your mother and sister died, we will give to them." "Yes," Cole agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "We will." The months of Meredith's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Cole converted one of the spare bedrooms into a nursery, building a cradle with his own hands. Meredith sewed baby clothes and blankets, her face glowing with contentment. She continued to work with the cattle and horses well into her 7th month, only stopping when her growing belly made it difficult to move with her usual agility. In late February of 1889, on a cold, clear night with a full moon hanging low over the mountains, Meredith went into labor. Cole rode hard to fetch the doctor from Paradise, then paced the parlor while Mrs. Crowley, who had insisted on being present for the birth, assisted upstairs. The sounds of Meredith's labor echoed through the house, each cry making Cole's heart clench with helpless fear. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually only 8 hours, he heard it, the thin wail of a newborn baby. Cole bolted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, and burst into the bedroom. Mrs. Crowley was wrapping a squirming bundle in a soft blanket while the doctor tended to Meredith. "You have a son," Mrs. Crowley announced, beaming. "A healthy, strong boy." Cole barely heard her. His eyes were fixed on Meredith, propped up against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. The doctor placed the baby in her arms, and Cole moved to the bed, sitting beside his wife and gazing down at their child. The baby had a shock of dark hair, and his eyes, though barely open, appeared to be Meredith's sage green. His tiny fists waved in the air, and his mouth opened in another cry. "He has got strong lungs," Meredith said, her voice hoarse but filled with wonder. "Cole, meet your son." Cole reached out with one finger to touch the baby's incredibly soft cheek. He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." They named him Thomas, after Cole's father, with the middle name of Daniel, a quiet acknowledgement of Meredith's first husband and the path that had eventually led her to paradise. Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, happy baby who rarely cried and seemed fascinated by everything around him. As he grew, it became clear that he had inherited his mother's affinity for animals. By the time he was 2 years old, he could walk among the cattle fearlessly, and they responded to him the same way they did to Meredith, with gentle acceptance. The ranch hands joked that the Finnegan family had some kind of magic, but Cole knew it was simply love and respect, passed down from mother to son. 2 years after Thomas was born, Meredith gave birth again, this time to a daughter they named Sarah Marie. She had Cole's dark hair and his stubborn determination, evident from the moment she entered the world howling her displeasure at the indignity of birth. Where Thomas was gentle and quiet, Sarah was fierce and fearless, toddling after her older brother and demanding to be included in everything. The ranch prospered beyond Cole's wildest dreams. The horse breeding operation became known throughout Nevada and beyond for producing animals of exceptional quality and temperament. The cattle operation expanded as well, with Cole purchasing additional land and increasing his herd. Other ranchers came from miles around to learn Meredith's techniques for gentling cattle, and she began teaching regular courses in what she called humane animal husbandry. But it was not just the ranch that thrived. Paradise itself grew, transforming from a dusty outpost into a real town with a proper school, a new church, and several thriving businesses. Cole and Meredith became pillars of the community, known for their generosity and integrity. They sponsored the school, making sure every child in the area had access to education. They employed dozens of ranch hands, treating them fairly and paying them well. On a spring evening in 1895, Cole sat on the porch of his ranch house, watching the sun set over the mountains. Thomas, now 6 years old, was in the pasture with his mother, helping her check on a mare that was close to foaling. Sarah, 4 years old and perpetually dirty from climbing trees and chasing chickens, sat beside Cole, her small hand in his. "Papa, tell me again about how you met Mama," she demanded, as she often did. Cole smiled, never tiring of the story. "I was mending fence posts when I saw her. She was standing in the pasture, talking to my cattle like they were old friends. I walked over to her and I knew right then that my life was about to change." "And you said the cattle needed her," Sarah prompted. "I said they had needed her for years," Cole confirmed, "and I was right. Those cattle, this whole ranch, we all needed her." "I need her too," Sarah said seriously. "We all do, sweetheart, we all do." Meredith and Thomas walked up to the porch then, both of them smiling. The mare had successfully foaled and the baby was healthy and strong. "Another one for the herd," Meredith said, settling into the chair beside Cole. Thomas climbed into her lap despite being almost too big for it, and Sarah immediately demanded equal attention, scrambling over to join them. Cole watched his family, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This life, this beautiful, unexpected life, had started with a chance encounter and a woman who talked to lonesome cattle. It had survived challenges and hardships, doubt and fear. But love, real love built on respect and partnership and genuine affection, had proven stronger than any obstacle. "What are you thinking about?" Meredith asked, catching his eye. "About how lucky I am," Cole said simply. "About how that day you wandered onto my land was the best day of my life." "Mine too," Meredith said softly. "I came to paradise looking for a fresh start, never imagining I would find a home. A real home with a man who sees me as an equal, with work that fulfills me, with children I adore. You gave me all of that, Cole. We gave it to each other, Cole corrected. That is what partnership means. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, the Finnegan family sat together on their porch, surrounded by the land they had built a life on. In the distance, the cattle lowed softly, no longer lonesome, no longer in need of comfort they could not find. They had been gentled by love and patience, just like the two people who had found each other on an October afternoon 7 years before. The years continued to pass, bringing with them the full richness of a life well lived. Thomas grew into a tall, thoughtful young man who shared his father's work ethic and his mother's gentle way with animals. At 18, he took over much of the day-to-day running of the horse breeding operation, demonstrating a natural talent for training that had buyers coming from as far as California to purchase Finnegan horses. Sarah, true to the fierce determination she had shown from birth, became the first female student to attend the new territorial college in Reno, where she studied agriculture and animal science. She returned to Paradise each summer, bringing new ideas and techniques that she implemented on the ranch with her father's full support and encouragement. In 1902, when Cole was 47 and Meredith was 40, they welcomed an unexpected addition to their family. Another son, whom they named James, arrived squalling into the world with the same healthy lungs his older brother had possessed. Thomas and Sarah, now teenagers, were delighted to have a baby brother, doting on him shamelessly. "I thought we were finished with sleepless nights," Cole joked one morning, dark circles under his eyes as he cradled James against his shoulder. "Life has a way of surprising us," Meredith replied, though she looked equally exhausted. "Besides, I am not complaining. Every child is a blessing." James proved to be a perfect combination of his siblings, inheriting Thomas's gentleness and Sarah's determination. He grew up quite literally in the saddle, riding before he could properly walk, and by the age of 5, could calm a spooked horse with nothing but his voice and his hands. The ranch continued to expand and prosper. Cole purchased more land, eventually owning one of the largest operations in the entire territory. But success never changed his fundamental nature or his relationship with Meredith. They remained true partners in every sense, making decisions together, respecting each other's opinions, dividing the work according to their strengths rather than arbitrary gender roles. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1909, Cole arranged for a special surprise. He had commissioned a portrait of Meredith and the cattle, based on that first day he had seen her. The artist had captured her perfectly, standing in the pasture with her hand outstretched, surrounded by gentle-eyed steers, her face serene and content. When Meredith saw it, tears streamed down her face. "Cole, it is beautiful. I cannot believe you remembered." "I remember everything about that day," Cole said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How you looked standing there, how the sun caught in your hair, how peaceful you seemed. That was the day my life truly began." "Mine too," Meredith said, leaning back against him. "I had given up on happiness, on being valued for who I was rather than what I could provide. And then I found you, and everything changed." They stood together in front of the portrait, two people who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had raised children with love and wisdom, who had proved that true partnership was not only possible but precious. As Nevada moved toward statehood and paradise, grew from a frontier outpost into a proper town with paved streets and electric lights, the Finnegan Ranch remained a constant, a testament to what hard work and genuine love could accomplish. Cole and Meredith became the town elders, the couple that younger people looked to as an example of what marriage should be. They weathered hard times together, the drought of 1910 that killed half their herd, the influenza epidemic of 1911 that swept through Paradise and took several lives, though miraculously spared the Finnegans. They celebrated triumphs together: Thomas's marriage to a kind schoolteacher from Reno, Sarah's groundbreaking work in agricultural science that earned her recognition throughout the West, James's decision to study veterinary medicine so he could return and care for the ranch animals with professional skill. On a warm summer evening in 1918, 30 years after their marriage, Cole and Meredith sat together on their porch as they had countless times before. They were both gray now, their faces lined with age and experience. Cole moved a bit slower, his joints stiff from decades of hard physical labor. Meredith's hands, though still skilled, showed the marks of a lifetime of work. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same people they had been 30 years before. Cole still saw the young woman standing in his pasture, talking to lonesome cattle with such compassion. Meredith still saw the man who had recognized her worth when she had almost forgotten it herself. "You have any regrets?" Cole asked, taking Meredith's hand in his. Meredith considered the question seriously, as she always did. "About leaving Missouri? No. About my first marriage. Only that I wasted 5 years trying to be someone I was not. About coming to Paradise, about meeting you, about building this life together. Not a single one." "Me neither," Cole said. "Every day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days. Especially the hard days," Cole said firmly. "Because we faced them together. Because you never let me give up, and I never let you doubt yourself. That is what marriage should be." Their grandchildren began to arrive as the years passed. Thomas and his wife had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Sarah, who had married later in life to a fellow agricultural scientist, had twins. James and his veterinarian wife welcomed their first child in 1920. The ranch house rang with laughter and noise, with the sound of children playing and learning, being taught the same lessons of kindness and respect that their parents and grandparents had learned. Cole made sure each grandchild spent time with the cattle, teaching them the techniques Meredith had pioneered decades before. "Your grandmother changed everything," he told them. "Before her, we treated animals as property. She taught us to treat them as beings worthy of kindness and consideration. That philosophy made this ranch what it is today." The grandchildren listened with wide eyes, some of them skeptical that simply talking to cattle could make such a difference. But when they tried it themselves, when they stood in the pasture and spoke gently to the massive animals and watched them respond with trust and calm, they understood. As Cole and Meredith grew older, they gradually stepped back from the active running of the ranch, turning over more responsibility to their children. But they remained involved, offering advice when asked, sharing the wisdom of decades of experience. They were content to watch the next generation take what they had built and make it even better. In the spring of 1925, on a morning that dawned clear and bright, Cole woke to find Meredith already awake beside him, staring at the ceiling with a contemplative expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, as he had asked thousands of times over their 37 years together. "About how far we have come," Meredith said. "That scared widow who walked into Paradise with nothing but a worn-out dress and a few dollars. That lonely rancher who spent his evenings alone. Look at us now. Look at what we built." Cole followed her gaze out the window, where he could see the ranch stretching out in all directions. The original house had been expanded several times, with wings added for the growing family. The barn his father had built was now one of several, each housing equipment and animals. The pastures were full of healthy cattle and horses, the legacy of decades of careful breeding and humane treatment. In the distance, He could see Thomas walking with his oldest son, clearly explaining something about the horses. Closer by, Sarah's twins were helping their mother in the garden, learning the same lessons about nurturing growth that their grandmother had taught. "I am so proud of them," Cole said. "They have all taken what we taught them and built their own lives of meaning." "Because we showed them it was possible," Meredith said. "Because we modeled respect and partnership and love. That is the greatest legacy we could leave." They spent the day as they spent most days now, moving slowly through tasks that had once been second nature, but now required more effort. Cole checked on the newest foals while Meredith visited the cattle, still talking to them even though her voice had grown softer with age. They took their midday meal on the porch, watching the ranch bustle with activity. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, their children and grandchildren gathered for the weekly family dinner that had become tradition. The large dining table that Cole had built years ago was full to bursting with people, 3 generations of Finnegans breaking bread together. Cole looked around the table, his heart full to overflowing. This, he thought, was success. Not the size of his herd or the money in his bank account, though those things provided security. Real success was this: a family bound together by love and respect, carrying forward the values he and Meredith had worked so hard to instill. After dinner, after the grandchildren had been herded off to bed, and the adult children had departed for their own homes on various parts of the ranch property, Cole and Meredith returned to their porch. It was their favorite place, had been since the beginning. From here they could see everything they had built together. "Cole," Meredith said softly, her hand finding his in the darkness. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me that day. For not just seeing a trespasser or a potential employee, but seeing me, the real me. For giving me the chance to be myself, fully and completely. For loving me not in spite of who I am, but because of who I am." Cole raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "The thanks go both ways. You took a lonely cowboy and taught him what real partnership looked like. You took cattle he saw as just livestock and showed him they were living beings deserving of compassion. You took this ranch and turned it into something that matters, not just economically but morally. Everything good in my life traces back to the day you appeared in my pasture." "The cattle needed me," Meredith said, echoing his words from that first day. "And I needed you," Cole replied. "More than I ever knew." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Nevada sky. The night sounds of the ranch surrounded them, the soft lowing of cattle, the whinny of horses, the whisper of wind through grass. These were the sounds that had formed the backdrop of their entire married life, constant and comforting. The years continued their march forward, bringing changes both large and small. The country weathered the Great Depression, and the Finnegan Ranch, though impacted like everywhere else, survived due to careful management and decades of building up reserves. Cole and Meredith made sure none of their ranch hands were let go, even when money was tight, and they quietly helped families in Paradise who were struggling, paying for groceries and covering doctor bills without fanfare or expectation of repayment. In 1935, Cole celebrated his 80th birthday surrounded by his enormous family. 3 children, 11 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren gathered to honor the man who had built a legacy of integrity and love. Meredith, 73 and still sharp as ever despite her white hair and lined face, organized the entire celebration with the help of Sarah. 80 years, Thomas said in his toast. 80 years of life lived with purpose and meaning. "Dad, you taught us that success is not measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch and the values we uphold." You showed us that treating others with respect and kindness is not weakness but strength. You and Mom built something that will endure long after we are all gone, not just this ranch but the philosophy behind it. Cole, his eyes misty, stood to respond. His voice was not as strong as it once was, but it carried clearly in the hushed room. I cannot take credit for this alone. Everything I am, everything this family has become, is because of your mother. She taught me that love is not possession but partnership. She showed me that animals deserve our compassion. She proved that a woman's mind and abilities are every bit as valuable as a man's. Without her, I would still be a lonely bachelor, treating cattle as property, living half a life. She made me whole. Meredith stood beside him, taking his hand. We made each other whole, she corrected gently. That is what real love does. As Cole's health began to decline in his early 80s, Meredith was by his side constantly, just as he had been by hers during her various illnesses over the years. She read to him from the journals she had kept throughout their marriage, reminding him of adventures they had shared, challenges they had overcome, quiet moments of happiness. On a spring evening in 1938, with the windows open to let in the warm breeze and the sound of cattle in the distance, Cole lay in the bed he had shared with Meredith for half a century. His children and grandchildren had come to say their goodbyes, each one telling him how much he meant to them, how his example had shaped their lives. When they had gone, and it was just Cole and Meredith, she lay down beside him as she had every night for 50 years. "I am not ready to let you go," she whispered, her tears falling onto his weathered face. "I am not going far," Cole assured her, his voice barely audible. "I will be waiting for you." And our story, the story of the lonely cowboy and the woman who talked to his cattle, that story will live on in our children and grandchildren. They will tell it to their children, and it will be remembered. "I love you," Meredith said, "from that very first day until this moment and beyond." "You are my heart." "And you are mine," Cole replied. "Always." He died peacefully as the sun rose, painting the desert sky in shades of gold and pink, with Meredith's hand in his and the sounds of the ranch he loved all around him. Meredith grieved deeply, but not hopelessly. She knew Cole would not want her to stop living, would want her to continue on, enjoying their children and grandchildren, watching the ranch flourish. So she did, throwing herself into teaching the great-grandchildren the same lessons she had taught their parents and grandparents. She lived another 7 years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She died in her sleep on a quiet autumn night in 1945, surrounded by 3 generations of family. Her last words, spoken to Sarah, who sat holding her hand, were simple. "Tell the cattle I said goodbye." They buried Meredith beside Cole on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a large oak tree that provided shade and peace. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, and a single inscription that their children had chosen together. Partners in life, love, and legacy. The Finnegan Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, always operated according to the principles Cole and Meredith had established. The story of how they met, how a widow talking to lonesome cattle had captured a cowboy's heart, became family legend, told and retold until it took on an almost mythical quality. But those who worked the land, who cared for the animals, who walked the pastures at sunset, knew it was all true. They could feel the presence of Cole and Meredith in every acre, in every decision made with integrity, in every animal treated with respect. The cattle were never lonesome again, because they carried within them the memory of a woman's gentle voice telling them they mattered, and a man's understanding that all living beings deserve kindness. Paradise, Nevada grew and changed over the decades, transforming from a frontier town into a modern community. But the Finnegan Ranch remained a constant, a reminder of what could be built when two people chose love and partnership over convention and convenience. When respect and compassion guided decisions more than profit and power, young couples in paradise would walk past the ranch and point to the headstones on the hill, visible from the road. They would tell each other the story of Cole and Meredith, of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, of a life built on mutual respect and genuine affection. And they would promise each other that their own marriages would follow that example, would honor the legacy of two people who had proved that real love was not just possible but transformative. The cattle still grazed in the pastures, generations removed from the ones Meredith had first gentled. But they retained the same calm temperament, the same trust in humans, because each generation of Finnegans had continued her work. Young children would stand at the fence and talk to them, using the same soft voices and gentle words, and the cattle would come, drawn by something deeper than instinct, something that whispered of a long-ago woman who had seen them not as property, but as beings worthy of kindness. On quiet evenings, when the sun set over the mountains and painted the desert in shades of orange and gold, ranch hands would swear they could hear two voices on the wind, a man and a woman, talking and laughing together. They would smile and continue their work, comforted by the knowledge that some loves are so strong they transcend death itself, living on in the land and the animals and the people who remember. And in the ranch house that Cole had built and Meredith had made into a home, in the leather-bound journals that filled an entire bookshelf, the story was preserved in Meredith's own words. Future generations would read about that first meeting, about the lonesome cattle that needed her, about a cowboy who saw her true worth, about a love that had transformed two lonely people into partners who built something lasting and beautiful. The final entry in Meredith's journal, written just days before her death, contained these words: "I came to paradise seeking escape from pain and found instead a purpose and a love beyond my wildest dreams. Cole taught me that my voice mattered, that my abilities had value, that I was worthy of respect and genuine affection. Together we built not just a ranch, but a legacy of compassion and partnership. If our story can inspire even one person to treat others, human or animal, with greater kindness, then our lives will have mattered. And if it can show even one woman that she deserves to be truly seen and valued, or one man that strength and gentleness can coexist, then everything we went through to find each other will have been worth it." This is the story of the lonesome cattle that needed me and the cowboy who needed me even more. But it is also the story of how I needed them, needed this place, needed this life. We saved each other, Cole and I, and in doing so, we created something that will endure long after we are gone. And endure it did, through decades and generations, a testament to the transformative power of love built on respect, nurtured with kindness, and sustained through partnership. The story of Cole Finnegan and Meredith Grayson became part of Paradise's history, part of Nevada's heritage, a reminder that the most extraordinary lives can begin with the simplest moments: a woman talking to cattle, a cowboy recognizing that they had needed her for years, and two people brave enough to build something beautiful together.